Hey everybody, this is Jorge and welcome to Coding with Reporting Pal. So in today's video we're going to be presenting coding with Google Apps Script. I wanted to start off this videos with a couple of basic features for those of you newcomers or entering into the Apps Script spectrum or JavaScript itself. A couple of coding techniques there that will help you out, so let's get started. So in today's lesson we're going to cover up creating a function called timestamp. We're going to return that timestamp value and we're going to send it within Google Apps Script to services such as email or loading it into a spreadsheet just so that you can see how it works. In general, we're going to create a variable for date, time zone, time, day, and I want to call this now. So basically now is going to combine the date and time. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to load our script editor. Basically what we'll be doing is we'll go into script.google.com, as you see over here. You'll get this page where you can create a new project, and immediately you'll be able to get a function, my function, which is basically our starting point of the code. Once we do that, the next step that we need to do is that we need to rename our function, as we stated, to timestamp. You'll open these two parentheses and then open brackets. A couple of people like to place these brackets under. I really prefer to leave them after. It's really up to you, as long as you're following a certain syntax or a style. So, as mentioned, we're going to be creating a variable for date, a variable for time, one for date, and one for now. Which is basically what we'll be returning to our function so that we can reutilize the code. So in order to basically tell our machine that we are creating a new date, we're going to be using the new call, and then we're going to create a date class, which basically is going to return all the information regarding the current time and the current date. If you want to validate that you're pulling the right information, you can use the logger.log function and you can return the date here, and then you can select, well, let's save first our project, this timestamp, and we can run it. So once you run it, you go into view, logs, and then you'll see here that it creates a timestamp automatically for us. So the reason why we create different variables is just so that it doesn't appear as ugly as this, and I'll show you in a little bit, as we'll be using something called utilities, which is a built-in feature for Google Apps Script. Alright, so now that we were able to get our new date with basically the new date class callout, the next thing that we need to do is make sure that our syntax, or basically our callback, looks pretty or looks nice. So what we'll do is that we'll create a variable called time. And basically time, what it will do is that we'll use utilities dot format date. We're going to assign it a time zone. Whoops. And we're going to make sure that we call this time zone. I like to do it through global variables. So basically what I'm doing here is that I'm telling it that time zone is my calendar app, get my default calendar, and get the time zone that is being utilized on my default calendar. This way I don't have to, so for example, if I'm having someone else running the code, it will load their calendar time zone information as opposed to mine, because I'm coding for someone in Zurich or someone in New Zealand, and they are in different time zones. So that will help me avoid an issue of it staying stale here as Guatemala time zone. So going back to this, the format that we need to use is that we're going to call hours, minutes, and then we're going to define if it's AM or PM. Right now it's AM, so basically what we should be getting is a 12:01 AM. If we want to test out our current code and make sure that we're loading the same information, we could use logger.log, same way, and we could hit on run so that we can see our time zone being loaded. This takes a couple of minutes sometimes, depending on how much you've coded so far. So give it a minute or two, and it should be loading the information. There we go. So if you want to be more effective, you could click on the row, and basically you can debug as well. This will help you be more efficient. Even if you notice that it took little time for it to load my date variable, and you can see the other things, the other variables that you've already created. And when you hit next step, it loads the 1202A. So we're going to need to create a variable now for our day. So I'm assigning this day. The code is exactly the same. The only difference here is the format that we'll be using, which is month, day, and then year, represented with /. Always remember to use semicolon to close out each line. This is then again a syntax thing. Some IDEs or some programming coders or software don't load if you don't use semicolon. Google Apps Script really doesn't care as much of it. So if I were to run it this way, I'm not going to get any error, but it's definitely going to look ugly. So moving forward, the next item that we need to create is the now, which will be returning, so that every time that we call our function timestamp, we tell it, within timestamp, what exactly do you want me to load from here? So I want you to load the now, and now is basically a concatenation of my time and my day. Now, if I represent time and day just with a plus sign as it is right here, it's going to be crumbled up. So in order for me to add a space, I close a double quote, and I leave it an empty space in between so that I make sure that I'm keeping that separated variables. Once again, I want to see if this works. So log now, let's play it, and you'll be able to see in your log that we have 12:04 a.m. 4/25/2020. So that's working well. And the next thing that we'll be doing is that we'll be returning this into an email and into a spreadsheet. So once we're done with creating our timestamp function that we want to utilize, we want to make sure that every time we run the code timestamp or we call back timestamp, we return the now information. So in order to do that, we use return, and we basically tell it return now. This way, every time we run timestamp, runs date, runs time, day, then it concatenates it with now, and it says, okay, from here, all of this, I'm going to compile it, and I'm going to only return the now every time I run. As you've seen, the code's changed a little bit. I've added the email, basically script file, and the spreadsheet script file so that we're a little bit more effective on the video. But to do this, basically you'll click on File, New, and then you'll click on Script File. So I've created a spreadsheet, and if you'd like, we can take a look at this first. Well, where I will place my timestamp. You can really name it whatever you want, as what we'll be doing is we'll be taking the ID for the spreadsheet in order to load it and basically say I want to write on the spreadsheet the timestamp information. To do this, I'm creating a new script file as mentioned. I can leave it as my function, but let's always rename it to make sure that you're utilizing different basically functions every time you're running code. Let's call this spreadsheet timestamp. And basically here what we'll be doing is we're creating a variable for our spreadsheet, which is using the spreadsheet app dot open by URL. As you noticed, I copied the URL from the timestamp Google sheet that I created over here. I need to tell it what sheet I need to load. So I'm loading the sheet 1. Whoops. So ss dot sheet by name. Whoops. And then I need to make sure that I take a range. So sheet dot get range. Now, for the sakes of the tutorial, I'm just gonna tell it what row and what column. I want to take the first row and the first column. I'm not gonna get too fancy on this as I can cover it on another course and not make or deviate this as much. And here, what I can do is that I can put range dot set value. Oops, sorry about that. And I can place my timestamp function. There we go. So I use Control-Shift-S to save all the sheets that I'm working with. Just add the semicolon over here. And then let's run our code. So let's click on run. It's going to ask us to authorize the services. Here I'm loading the spreadsheet service. So now you'll see edit and create or delete spreadsheets in Google Drive. I'm going to allow this. And there we go. Our timestamp loaded within our spreadsheet. Okay, let's just say that now we want to email that timestamp. So let's do very similarly. Create a script file, name it email. Let's call this email timestamp. And here I'll be using a different Google Apps Script service or app enabled service, and we'll use the mail app. So var subject. Let's call our var subject our timestamp. And let's create a sender. So in this case, the sender will be, let's do my email address. And then the body. And let's put hello. Your time is your subject. Okay. So once we've created all of our variables, like I mentioned, we're going to use the mail app. There's also the Gmail app. There's a bit of a difference between one and the other. And at one point in a project, I had an issue where I was trying to send an email and it was a brand new account. Because it was a brand new account, it started to hit limits or it wouldn't let me send out of my domain. So after reading some documentation, I noticed that using Gmail app creates some certain restrictions to new users, whereas Mail app doesn't. It's one or the other, but I'm very certain that it's most likely the Gmail app. So I stuck to using the Mail app class always. So let's do send an email. We've already got our subject and our body. Recipient, I named it sender, but let's just put recipient because he's not actually sending it, he's receiving it. And let's just run this code to test it out. It's going to ask me to authorize the services as well because now I'm using the mail app. And here it says send email as you. We allow it, no errors. And now if I go to my mail, I got a timestamp over here. All right, so this is how you work with Google Apps Script. I really hope that you found this tutorial useful. Make sure to click the like and subscribe button for more courses like this. And if you have any comments or suggestions, or even give me some feedback in regards of this first video, let me know in the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to make sure that I adjust those things.